The summer heat wasn't the only thing making things uncomfortable during this college send-off. When a stubborn son refuses to leave his TV behind, his mother finds herself pressed against him in the front seat for a 5-hour drive. Every bump in the road, every accidental touch sends sparks flying. With her husband just inches away but oblivious behind the mounted TV, their quiet gasps and stolen glances speak volumes. How long can they keep pretending this is just about saving space? The tension builds with every passing mile. Please don't forget to subscribe and comment. And one request, please always keep a smile on your face. The morning sun had barely risen when I found myself standing in the driveway, watching as my husband and son loaded the last of Mike's belongings into the car. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that made your clothes stick to your skin before you even broke a sweat. I tugged at the hem of my sundress, suddenly self-conscious about how short it had become over the years. Mike emerged from the house carrying his prized possession, a massive flat-screen TV that looked comically oversized in his arms. At 18, he'd grown into his frame, his shoulders broad from years of high school football, his arms corded with lean muscle. There was something about watching him struggle with the weight that made my throat go dry. "Where do you think that's going?" my husband asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Mike grinned, that same cocky smile he'd had since he was a kid. "Front seat. Mom can sit next to me." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, can I?" The car was already packed to the brim, and after a few minutes of rearranging, it became clear there was no room left. "Leave the TV," my husband said. "We'll bring it when we visit." Mike's face fell. "No way. I need it now." Then, after a pause, his eyes met mine. "Mom, you could sit on my lap." The suggestion hung in the air between us, heavy with something I couldn't quite name. "For 5 hours?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "You're light," he murmured. "I won't even feel you." The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. Upstairs, I stood in front of my closet, suddenly unsure of what to wear. The thought of sitting on Mike's lap for hours had me second-guessing everything. My usual jeans would be too tight, too hot. My fingers brushed against a sundress I hadn't worn in years, sleeveless, pale blue, with tiny white buttons running down the front. I slipped it on, letting the thin fabric flutter around my thighs. The dress was shorter than I remembered, the hem riding up when I moved. I turned to the mirror, taking in my reflection. At 37, I'd held up well, my body still toned from years of yoga, my skin still smooth. The dress clung to my curves in a way that felt dangerous. I hesitated, then reached behind my back and unhooked my bra, letting it fall to the floor. The dress was loose enough to hide the absence, but the fabric brushed against my skin in a way that made me acutely aware of my own body. A honk from outside snapped me out of my thoughts. I took one last look in the mirror, then grabbed my bag and headed downstairs. Mike was already in the passenger seat, the TV wedged securely between us. I hesitated for just a second before sliding onto his lap, my bare thighs pressing against his. The moment I settled in, I realized two things. First, the dress had ridden up even higher, leaving very little to the imagination, and second, Mike's body was warm beneath mine, his breath uneven against the back of my neck. "You good?" I asked, glancing over my shoulder at him. His hands hovered awkwardly at his sides. "Yeah. You're lighter than I thought." I smiled and turned to face forward as my husband started the car. The radio played softly, filling the silence as we pulled out of the driveway. For the first hour, everything was fine. Comfortable, even. Then, somewhere along the highway, I felt it, a subtle shift beneath me. Mike's breathing changed, his grip tightening on the seat beside me. I bit my lip, pretending not to notice the way his body reacted to mine. But I noticed. Oh, I definitely noticed. The dress crept higher with every slight movement. His thumbs brushed against the inside of my thighs, sending a jolt of electricity through me. The air in the car suddenly felt thicker, hotter. "Everything okay back there?" my husband asked, glancing at us in the rearview mirror. "Perfect," I said, my voice just a touch breathier than usual. Mike's fingers flexed against my skin. I shifted slightly, just enough to hear his quiet intake of breath. By the time we pulled into a gas station, the tension between us was unbearable. My face was flushed, my skin tingling where Mike's hands had been. As I climbed out of the car, I caught Mike's gaze lingering on my legs, his eyes dark with something I couldn't name. Inside the restroom, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. My cheeks were pink, my lips slightly swollen from where I'd been biting them. The dress was wrinkled from where Mike's hands had gripped me, and I smoothed it down with trembling fingers. When I stepped back outside, Mike was waiting by the car, his gaze intense as it raked over me. "Ready?" my husband called from the driver's seat. Mike held the door open for me, his fingers brushing against my waist as I slid back onto his lap. The moment the car started moving again, his hands settled on my hips, pulling me closer than before. The last hour of the drive was pure torture. Every touch, every whispered word between us sent my heart racing. Mike's breath was hot against my neck, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare skin that left me trembling. When we finally pulled into the college parking lot, I was wound so tight I could barely breathe. Mike helped unload his things, his fingers brushing mine every chance he got. When his dad went to find a parking spot, Mike pulled me close, his voice a low murmur in my ear. "You'll visit soon, right?" I smirked, trailing a finger down his chest. "Oh, I'll be visiting very soon." His grin told me he knew exactly what I meant.